This is Dr. Teo Wan Lin, and welcome to this special episode of Science of Beauty, where I'll be chatting with the beautiful Victoria Wondersnatch, a drag queen in Singapore who also happens to be a dermatologist and a clinician scientist. On a side note, Victoria and I were actually in dermatology residency training together over a decade ago. How time flies, Victoria.
Yes, thank you for having me on your podcast. Yeah, time really flies. I still remember all the days that we spent together training in dermatology.
Yeah, it feels like a really long time back, but, I think it was a really great experience for us as well. And I think now that we are both dermatologists, it's really a stage in our lives where we also want to give back to the community and the society. And especially now when the media and the public, they are acutely aware about the science and the medical aspect behind a lot of, aesthetic or beauty treatments. One of the important things that I hope we are able to bring across in this podcast is a perspective of beauty that is both science-based as well as one that promotes psychological wellness. Now, Victoria, before we go on, I would love for our listeners to know a little bit more about your fascinating life. I do know you are a huge fan of musical theatre, and I even attended one of your performances way back.
Yes, I still have that picture. I remember that picture I took with you and another one of our colleagues after my show. That was more than 10 years ago in what we used to have, this Musical Mondays open mic in Singapore. I'm a huge musical theatre enthusiast, and I used to go to this every single month. I think I was the only person that was there every single time, and each time I prepare a new song. very on. So that was actually a huge interest of mine.
I see. I also read your bio about how you were influenced in your early childhood with regards to your exposure to musical theatre and how that has led to your life passion now. Would you like to share with us a little more about that?
Yeah, so when I was young, my mom used to play musicals in the car all the time. At the time, I only knew things like Cats, Les Mis, Joseph, and stuff like that. And I really didn't think about the wealth of musical theatre and the history of musical theatre until I actually went to study in the United Kingdom. I went to medical school, and when I went to the HMV there, I found these musicals, cast recordings from the 50s and 60s, and that's when it really blew open my horizons of musicals, and I really was very passionate about it ever since. I've been in a few productions here and there, but I think because of my training, my medical training, I didn't really pursue it as much as I would have liked.
Well, nevertheless, you are such a star, Victoria. Well, we all know that you are an extremely accomplished dermatologist. You've completed a PhD in hair biology in the US. Would you like to share some thoughts with our listeners on the latest advances in hair research, as well as some of the hot topics around hair shaft disorders, scalp disorders?
Yeah, I did complete a PhD at Columbia University on hair. My research mainly focused on the control of the hair cycle by immune cells. So my lab was actually very interested in the autoimmune hair loss condition called alopecia areata, and it actually did come up with a new treatments for it with what these new molecules called the JAK inhibitors. So that's one of the big things about hair recently, but it's mainly reserved for the autoimmune forms of hair loss. The usual kind of hair loss that you see for stuff like, androgenetic alopecia or age-related alopecia, there's really not a lot of science going into these areas at the moment. A lot of what's available on the market and a lot of the cosmeceutical brands, unfortunately, are not backed by really good science. And also in humans, it's also something very difficult to study. And that's something that I'm trying to study at the moment as well.
Absolutely. Now, alopecia areata for our listeners is a form of autoimmune hair loss that is psychologically very disturbing because of the acute nature of hair fall and the fact that it is, in a sense, cosmetically disfiguring. It can lead to anxiety and a lot of distress in individuals who suffer from the condition. In cases where it is more rapidly progressive, you can develop a form of AA known as alopecia totalis or universalis, which thankfully are much rarer forms of the condition. So, Victoria, in your time in New York, share with us your experiences in performing there and how you managed to expand on your passion for musical theatre.
Well, New York City was probably one of the only places in the world I would have done a PhD in, and that was not an accident. I did apply only to New York labs when I was looking for a PhD, and that's because of my love for musical theatre and the proximity to Broadway. So when I was there, the first year I was in a medical student musical, Urinetown, and after that I actually started doing cabaret. I took a course of cabaret at 92nd Street YMCA, and after that the director of that course actually liked me so much that she invited me to be part of her roster of performers off Broadway. So we actually did quite a lot of these cabaret shows off Broadway. I did maybe 2 or 3 a year. And it was very, very rewarding. And I learned a lot about expressing myself and about communicating with an audience, stuff that I don't think I would have got if I stayed in Singapore.
Absolutely. Now, it's very interesting how you shared about your experience and the perspective it gave to your life, right? It sounds like you really solidified your identity during that period of time. Is that how you felt?
I think my identity is constantly evolving, and especially even with drag, I only started doing drag really properly when I came back to Singapore. I did it once or twice while I was doing my PhD, but that was also in Singapore. I never really did drag overseas. But I think once I started to really dig in and start to really delve into the meaning of drag, it really made me start thinking about questions about gender and self-expression and identity as well. And that's definitely something that is still evolving. And I think I mentioned this in an interview with my sister recently, that I think it also helps build empathy. You know, when I'm putting on a character or when I'm doing things that are not supposed to be meant for men, or you know, it makes me think about why am I doing it, and why does this make me happy, and why do people respond the way that they do when I'm in drag. So I think those are questions that I think really drives my passion for drag and musical theatre.
Well, that really resonates with me as well, because I feel that the core principle that should permeate all human relationships is empathy. And it is always timely, especially so in the year of 2020, when there are so many things, happening, for us to just take a step back and, think of others as well as of ourselves, but having this concern about how others are feeling and the kind of things they're going through, I feel that it is a very critical part of psychological wellness.
Yes, I really, really agree. And in Singapore, that's something that I think a lot of people have repressed. And that's one thing that I want to do with my drag also, is also to encourage people to express themselves more, so that we learn more about local stories and local lived experiences. And this is one of the reasons why with my drag, I did decide to start the Fund for the Arts that's affiliated with Action for AIDS. And we've actually held 2 charities which are raising money to help local artists tell local stories, local queer stories, to uplift these voices and to help to share these stories to improve empathy all around.
Wow, that's really fascinating, Victoria. Now, on that note, Victoria also has a cameo role in our book, Conscious Beauty, which is dedicated to the Action for AIDS Fund for the Arts Fund as well. Now, Victoria, I feel that, there's so much we can learn from you. And, I've recently come across your YouTube channel as well, where I've noticed you managed to incorporate dermatology into drag. Would you like to share with us a little bit more about your perspectives on these?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Wan Lin, for inviting me to be part of your coffee table book, Conscious Beauty. And I think it was quite out of the box for you to be including a drag queen in that book. And I was very honored to be part of that. And I think the whole idea on Conscious Beauty does apply to drag, because, what is drag but a way to poke fun at society's idea of what is beautiful and what is acceptable for women to wear. And that's actually what I try to do with my drag as well. You know, our drag is so exaggerated and we really blow everything out of proportion, and it leaves the viewer thinking, is this supposed to be what's beautiful? So yeah, I think that's something that I really like to convey with my drag. As for my YouTube channel, yes, I did start a YouTube channel, especially during quarantine, as a way of expressing myself also. And I was trying to find a way to bring myself to the YouTube channel. You know, there are a lot of these YouTubers who, when they're doing makeup, they talk about things that they like. There's a very famous YouTuber who talks about makeup while talking about true crime, for example. And I wanted to use my expertise in dermatology to do it with makeup. So I've been trying to, in my dermatology and drag series, I've been trying to teach people about skin conditions while doing my makeup in a way that references the skin condition. So that's my goal. It's been quite well received and also not so well received, and I'm learning as I go, because I think there was one video which I did on vitiligo, which actually got me into a bit of trouble because people thought I was making fun of vitiligo patients, which I would never do. So it's a learning process.
Well, you know, I feel that the most important message that you've brought across in your series of videos is really that of incorporating this sense of perspective, both as a dermatologist and as a drag queen who is experimenting with makeup, and as you yourself has said, perhaps providing a different viewpoint from societal norms that really encourages the audience to reflect on their own personal prejudices, sometimes biases. And in fact, I must say that it was such an honor to be able to include you in our coffee table book, because in fact, you inspired me to add a little parenthesis in front of our on the book cover, in front of the word conscious beauty, which is in unconscious beauty, because I realized through your story how much of our personal perceptions and judgments are made sometimes unconsciously. But when you reflect on the nature of our beliefs and judgments, nothing we do is unconscious. It starts from somewhere. So I think, Victoria, it is true, this awakening that we each as individuals of society can play our role to really move forward in encouraging others and developing love and empathy. Now, Victoria, it's been such a pleasure for you to be on this podcast. Before we conclude, I just want to ask you for any final comments or thoughts you have to share.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say how impressed I am with you. I probably did expect this from you when we were training together, that you would go far and do amazing things. And watching your career, especially in the last 2 years, of what you've done has really inspired me and also made me proud that to call you a friend. So and thank you for bringing me on this podcast. And I'd like to just let your listeners know as well that I think Singapore does have a long way to go when it comes to being accepting of different standards of beauty and also different standards of gender and sexual expression. So I think that's something that maybe we can all work together to try to improve for our society.
What a beautiful message, Victoria. For our listeners, I just want to share that I find the message of hope and acceptance in Victoria's story really uplifting and truly inspiring. We certainly need more of this in today's world of beauty. Beauty isn't and shouldn't be a cookie-cutter concept. Diseases of the skin and the hair are the most visible of all medical conditions. Patients with acne, eczema, psoriasis, or alopecia suffer as much psychologically or more as they do physically. As dermatologists, Victoria and I are acutely aware of the negative psychosocial impact of societal judgments and how this has to be addressed. And at its very heart is an issue that should start with the individual, learning about respect, love, empathy for others, and above all, unconditional acceptance. Well, thank you for joining us on this podcast, Dermatologist Talks, Science of Beauty, Victoria. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege to have you. Now, share with us where we can find you on your socials.
Thanks, Wanlin. You can find me on Instagram, and it's just at Wondersnatch. I post most of my looks there, including my dermatology and drag series. And I'm also on YouTube. If you search Victoria Wondersnatch, my channel is actually growing at a decent rate. So I think I've been very inspired to do a lot of collaborations lately. So I've been using it to interview local drag queens, and also talk about and also bring people on to talk about their own queer experiences. So I hope you can join me there too.
Thank you all for joining us, and till the next podcast.